who complain that this whole thing has taken too long, that we thought that BCS facilities would be figured out by the end of the 5-year agreement. I totally feel that as well, and I think that's part of the reason why I don't think we can really go back and start from scratch at this point. I think that the framework, at a high level, the framework is just about right. BCS has been asking for a single site for years. They should be a single school, and they should get that. With that in mind, further growth on the part of BCS is just as much of a rejection of this framework as any action that we could take tonight. If they go above 1,100 students to 1,200 or 1,300, then they will never be a single site school because there is no land in this district that will hold that many kids in a safe and equitable fashion. So that if whatever happens tonight, whatever happens on this item or the next item, if they choose to continue the growth, that's the choice we'll make, and that will be a rejection of this framework on their part, just as much as any rejection could be. To those who say that we're somehow baiting and switching by wanting to take a little bit more time on the long-term agreement and talking about a short-term, I don't think that's right. I think the short-term is talking about actually beginning to implement the proposed agreement. There is no further delay in a single site for BCS by agreeing to do the first couple years than there would be if we agreed to the whole thing. And part of the proposed agreement was agreeing to bring it in front of the public and getting feedback. So this is part of the process. I actually think that the issues that have been raised, I mean, we knew that there would be issues raised about traffic and safety, but the issues raised about the question of the geographic preference is a validation of the need for this kind of broad public feedback. The understanding in the 5-year agreement was that the preference for the former Bullis Prisma attendance area was going to be phased out, and that once it was phased out, it would be gone. It turns out that when BCS renewed their charter, that's not the way it got written up. It got written up as a phase out to 0 for the 2019 school year, but then there is no phase out for 2020 or 2021. So it turns out it would be back. So that's something that we need to address in any proposed agreement, in my opinion, before we could approve it. So that's something that we'll have to bring back and talk to the BCS folks about in any event, because I think everybody can agree that if BCS is at 20% of the district and the district is rearranging to accommodate them, then they should not be preferentially enrolling students from a very small and the most wealthy part of our district. So there aren't any easy options. I think that I also want to get a little perspective on delay. I mean, this has taken too long already. I wish it was settled years ago. But if we take 5 or 6 months to thoughtfully present all the data, either bring all you guys on board or have you help us come up with a better solution, that's still before the next kindergarten enrollment cycle, right? We're not going to be, I understand, I've had some parents of kindergartners who will be starting in 2019 write to me about all this uncertainty about where they're going to be. Is it going to be Loyola? Is it going to be Egan? I feel the uncertainty that's caused by parents in certain situations. But we can't rush this when it's going to cause so much change in the district as a whole. I don't think taking another 6 months is unreasonable, and it will make sure that we really get a solid agreement that does what everybody thinks it will do and puts us on a solid footing going forward. And I think that's all the comments I have at this time.
Vladimir.
Okay. Thank you all for your input, and we do listen to your input. Basically, what I wanted out of this process that we're going through right now was a delay before we signed a long-term agreement, and then the opportunity for you to give us rational, substantive input on what you thought about the various different options. When we negotiated, when we were in negotiation, which was confidential, we discussed that in closed session, which is also confidential, so none of us could talk about it. And I think that that was a big mistake because we didn't get your input. And you're the ones who are most going to be affected by it. I'm not going to be affected. My kids are going to be out of the district by then. at least in a couple of years. So your input is absolutely crucial to making this a success. And the thing that I don't understand is how BCS or BCS parents think that giving up Egan is going to bring peace to the community. I just don't see how I don't understand how they think that. Whether it's fair or not, I just don't understand how that's going to happen. So I have a long list here of retorts and rebuttals and corrections and stuff like that, and I'm not going to go through them. I disagree with a lot of the rationale of BCS parents, and I agree with a lot of your rationale as LASD parents. And so I'm hopeful that we will not approve the long-term agreement. I'm also hopeful that we'll approve some sort of short-term agreement. And I would look to BCS in what they do next as a signal of how willing they are to cooperate. If they continue to bully us by increasing their enrollment, that sends us a very clear message. And I hope that you will be behind us, with us, and will recognize the signal for what it is. Thank you.
Steve?
Guy, thanks. I also echo the thank you for the time you've spent trying to educate us about your concerns. I think that's very critical for what we've been going to. 18 months ago when this process started, I think I was in the same frame of mind you are all in tonight. We were surprised by some of the requests, that's my nice way of putting it, that came across in terms of opening salvos of how this should be resolved, size of program, things that should be made available. It took a lot of back and forth to get to where we are now. I think my major concern is we're now relying on BCS to agree to one more thing, which is a cap on enrollment with no guarantees of how this will work out. So that would be my one concern about the delay that we are talking about next. But I do understand why the community has a hard time embracing the thought that if we say yes now, that is a lock. And that is not my understanding of what we're agreeing to. It's my understanding is what we're doing is locking their enrollment, but we're not locking where we're going to end up in 5 years. But that's my interpretation of where things are and how we can maybe manipulate it to a different outcome. That said, I've heard the concerns, I've lived the concerns, and we'll just kind of see where we go from here.
Shelley?
Should have been prepared. Thank you all for coming tonight. Thank you for being engaged with us over these last very many weeks. I hope you continue to stay engaged with us. As Brian said, public input was always going to be part of this process, and I firmly believe in the public engagement process. A BCS parent said, don't discard the voice of the minority, about minorities being pushed around. That's the purpose of the public engagement process. I don't think it would surprise anyone to know that there are parents at BCS who are opposed to the long-term agreement, who do not want to be on a mega site, but they're too afraid to come forward with their opinions. I'm hoping that we can capture everyone's opinion through the public process. I agree with my fellow board members, so I don't want to reiterate what they said. Thanks.
All right, my turn. A bunch of you, as parts of the parent community, actually have seen my opinion as it relates to the 10-year agreement and whether we should go through an interim agreement process. I think we are being the adults in the room by being patient and realizing that there's a good amount of the community here that while we have gone through this process for many, many, many years, there are newcomers to this process who haven't been. And it's time to get them up to speed and go through this process. I do believe that the framework of the agreement should stay intact, but that we should not agree to the 10-year right now. that we should delay any sort of vote on that agreement. There's nothing really I can add to what you have all said. So now we need to figure out what we're doing. Do I have a motion at all? All right, why don't we direct staff to table this until the public process is over. Thank you. Next item.
Can I make a further comment? I do think it is important that we figure out as quickly as we can a firm deadline. I will read it again. As some people have said, I don't think this can hang fire for very long. I don't think there are a lot of options out there that are unexplored. I think it's a matter of getting everything compiled. Now, this is the first time that really we've all been in the same room at the same time grappling with this problem. And so what we need to do is get all the data together, present all the options. I saw an email that went around today that had, I think, more than a dozen that have been thrown around, and all of them closed or relocated an LASD school. If there was an easy solution, we would have gotten there already. So what we need to do is figure out which hard solution we can all come together around and move forward. I think we can do that over a relatively constrained period of months, enough that, we don't need to waste more educational years before we get to something. So I hope we will.
I agree.
Do I get to throw in my 2 cents? I don't think that hard compromises are necessary. If we're willing to enlarge the pie, then we can get what we want. And I really don't like the idea of we have to give up a school. We can do better than that, I think.
Thank you, Vladimir. Let's move on to E2, Proposed Interim Facilities Agreement with Bullis Charter School. We don't really have a presentation for that?
We don't, but we have an attachment. So attached to the agenda, posted with the agenda on Friday. The board asked last week for staff to put together an interim agreement that mirrored the short-term aspects of the proposed 10-year agreement. Attached to the agenda, you will find that. So it is a 2-year agreement as it is written, but of course that's flexible, and the board can discuss that as well as any other component of this.
We have, sorry, let me go through this, actually count this time. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. All right, we have 9 speakers, so let's start with, we'll do 2 minutes. Wendy Yu, Kim Van Wert, Tina Holtz, Bobby Otelar, Tim Fitzgibbons, Nand Krishnan, Nancy Yang, Wendy Herbie, and Fatih Ilgin. I read everybody on the list. So Wendy Yu. All right, let's be quiet so we can get through this, guys. Thank you.
How much time do I have?
2 minutes.
2 minutes, thank you. Hi, everyone. So last Friday I heard that there is a revised proposal, proposed by LASD. So the proposal and the logic behind it is, well, BCS had already voted to agree on a 10-year agreement, and why don't we pick some of the conditions over there? I'm sure they will agree because they have already agreed to the 10-year agreement. I don't agree to that. Imagine a parent who tells the child, well, if you eat broccoli, I'll give you chips. And the kid say, okay, I'll eat broccoli if you give me chips. And then the parent changed the mind and say, you know what, since you have agreed on eating broccoli, now I'm going to give you a new offer. You have to eat the broccoli, but no chips for you. Because you have already agreed to the previous agreement, you must say yes to this one. That doesn't make sense to me. Why would anyone think, that is feasible? And what I worry is, what if BCS says no to it? Are we going back to the Prop 39 agreement? Are we going to give Loyola to BCS as a third campus? Do they no longer have a cap? Can they grow to whatever size they want to, next year? I don't know. That is something that we all need to think about. Thank you.
Thank you. Kim Van Wert.
Hello. I'm Kim. I grew up in the Los Altos schools myself, Santa Rita, Egan, and Los Altos High. And when I moved back here, I was hoping to give that same amazing experience to my 3 daughters. The proposed 10-year agreement was a shock, and I do relate to how the BCS school must feel right now. The agreement was negotiated in good faith, but it was a huge miss. And as Herb Marshall so eloquently said, this is not a reflection of the LASD negotiations team, but the process was not transparent. We did not have a clear evaluation framework, and we do not seem to be negotiating with a party that is thinking about the Los Altos community collectively. I can't stop thinking about how much this seems to fit the bully mold. Quote, I'll stop kicking your ass if you give me your lunch. More specifically, we'll cap enrollment and stop suing you if you give us the exact school we want that serves half your LASD students. And I hear it here again tonight. I don't expect them to agree to the interim agreement. We should fully expect and prepare for them to launch more lawsuits and enroll as many as they can to create more leverage. But we won't be bullied. We will find a solution through a more transparent and community-supported process that we all feel comfortable with. And to the comments about a war continuing and that winter is coming, know that we will not be intimidated by threats or White Walkers. This community has grit.
Guys, please.
This community has grit and intelligence, just like Arya, and we will not give up. We ask the board to not give up either. Thank you.
I ask that you don't give any spoilers.
Hi, I'm a Gardner Bullis mom. I'm a lawyer. I also have a lot of BCS friends, including the gentleman who's about to speak after me. I have read the interim agreement and the 10-year proposal, and obviously the overwhelming majority of us are opposed to the 10-year agreement, but the interim agreement I don't think is the answer either. I'm concerned about what message the interim agreement conveys. It seems that either you're being disingenuous with BCS into thinking that they're actually going to agree to this and to an agreement that has all the downsides and none of the upsides, and I'm concerned that you're being disingenuous to our community because really you've already made up your minds and you're already going to give them Egan. So either one of those obviously does not convey the right message. This is what happens when you have 1.5 years of confidential mediation on behalf of a community and then you spring it on us at the very last minute. I implore you that the right thing to do is to vote no on both of these agreements. No, Prop 39 is not ideal, but the current proposals aren't either. So let's try to work out an alternative. We've got a lot of really, really smart people in this community. Please use us as your resources and let's find an alternative that works better for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Bobby.
Yeah, I had something to say, but before I say it, I actually wanted to respond to Steve. I was very impressed with him. He actually seemed one of the few people I've heard who got the agreement the way I got it, which was, as far as I can read it, the 10-year part says BCS enrollment doesn't go up. My daughter gets more than 600, square feet to 1,000 everyone else gets. And then the board can just say, we just don't feel like the Egan thing. We just don't want to do it. I believe that's in the terms. So as far as I understand the agreement, the long-term one says the board here, y'all have complete discretion, say no one's ever moving to Egan, and that's underneath the agreement, but BCS doesn't grow. And I think you're the only one who said that, so I thought it was very helpful. They're saying save Egan. Save Egan, even if you agree to the 10-year thing, whatever save Egan means, all we have to do is lobby y'all and say we don't agree that it's in the right interest of the district, and we're still covered, and there's no more fighting. And it's all negotiating, so that's good. The other thing is I actually want to agree completely with what Tina said. As like a person on the BCS side, this 2-year thing, it feels just like a political move, so I hope you vote it down. It just seems like someone saying, well, we're not going to improve that, so we'll approve something else so it looks good in the paper, so now BCS has to be one who voted something down. It doesn't feel like a honest, like back and forth, like let's come to an agreement. It feels like let's stick them a little bit by saying we agreed to something and they voted it down. I don't think it's in good faith. It doesn't feel that way. Maybe it's meant that way, but that's how it comes across. So I really think you ought to vote down the 2-year thing because it just doesn't seem like a starter point for good negotiations. It seems like you're just trying to win a political point somewhere. Maybe that's not your intention, but that's the way it comes across. So thought you ought to know. So.
Thank you. Tim Fitzgibbons.
Hi, thank you again. Tim Fitzgibbon. I have a Gardner Bullis daughter and a preschooler. I again want to thank you for your time. I'm also unclear about the interim agreement. I'm more concerned about what it does to BCS and does it create more conflict. What I urge or what I say is, I have friends at BCS. I have friends in the community, my neighbors, people I run with. So I'm not looking to, I don't want them to feel like we are sliding them or taking a full agreement, only parts of it. I think we do have tough decisions to make, and I think the big point is we need an agreement that the community will get behind, and something that would hopefully not further divide us. If BCS comes and takes actions that's going to further divide us, that's on them, but that shouldn't be on you guys. We are the good guys. They are the White Walkers, or they can choose to be.
Thank you. Nand Krishnan. And then Nancy Yang, Wendy Herbie, and Fatih Ulgan. To get in line would be great. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Thanks for giving me the opportunity. I'd like to think I'm a good guy too. So this interim proposal, it just feels like an end around, right? So I don't know what you guys are trying to do. I know there was an 18-month negotiated, whatever, under closed sessions and things like that. I know the board is trying to get public input, but just bringing an interim agreement at the last minute just seems like a political move. I don't think it solves for anything. I think you should, there is no milestones, nothing that we are trying to get to. When we say, hey, it's a 2-year agreement, it just feels like, okay, we're just kicking the can down the road another 2 years. It's not going to solve this problem. This problem's been here in this community for 15 years, and I've lived in this community for 13 years. So I've seen this. I know the last time there was a mediated agreement that was about giving up Covington to BCS. It was brought back into the same MPR. The public all spoke out about it. And then here we are again, 6 years later, trying to talk about another agreement from a mediated negotiating session. So it just doesn't seem to work. So even if you want to go down a path of interim agreement or something like that, there needs to be some clear goals, deadlines, and milestones. Otherwise, it's not going to work. Thank you.
Thank you. Nancy.
Hi, Nancy Yang here, Loyola parent. I'd like to say just a few words tonight in favor of community and collaboration and possibly idealism and naivete, but here I am. Yay team, we all love our kids. And I'm not just talking about collaboration among LASD parents and schools, but I really want to see collaboration with Bullis Charter parents. And I know I speak for everyone when I say we pay our taxes with the expectation that our money goes into helping the community. For instance, to pay for our roads, our police department, our fire department, and of course, public education. And because we are here because of school choice, I'm here to express what my choice is. My choice is for my tax dollars to go towards one working system, not two fighting against each other. Just like it goes to one police department, to one system that works together for the purpose of educating all our community's kids who will one day be making decisions that affect us when we're old. One system, or older, one system that is held accountable to the community, and no doubt one system that teaches children, in addition to reading and math, the golden rule, compassion, sharing, and critical thinking, all for the betterment of one community and the sustainability of our nation's freedom. Now, I know we aren't there yet from a legislative perspective where that is just part of the system, but there are a lot of people who are strong advocates for public education that are working to reform charter laws, and honestly, I think we should possibly mobilize and join them for those who are interested. But for the immediate future, I think it's in the best interest for both parties to come together and show community commitment and faithfulness, particularly BCS. I think it would only be a good thing for them to show that they understand why people are having such a difficult time going forward with losing a beloved school and why it must go. And I think the alternative to not collaborating is an even stronger lack of trust in BCS and, of course, more discord in our community, all of which would be horrible. I know it's a lot to ask, but please help us find a way to build a bridge here because, frankly, I'm tired. And peace and love to everyone in here. We all should be friends.
Thank you. Wendy Herbie. And then Fatih Ulgan.
Hi, I'm Wendy Herbie. I've been in the Los Altos neighborhood and district for a long time, had LASD kids, Bullis Charter kids, so I have both sides of the coin. One thing I think, I agree with Tina Holz and Bobby and the other people that have spoken. I do feel like the 2-year agreement is not in the best interest. It feels like we aren't able to pass the 10-year agreement that both sides worked on. And by the way, the Bullis parents learned about the 10-year agreement the same time the LASD parents did. So there's different emotions on both sides, and not everybody is in the same spot. But one thing I wanted to say, which as a lawyer, reading the 10-year agreement, is that it was kind of illusory, because you could do the 10-year agreement, you guys would get your cap, but at any time, if you decided it was not in the best interest of LASD, you can decide to keep Egan. But I think there still needs to be communication between the parties. I think we need to work together, and that also blaming BCS parents that are part of your sports teams. We go to the community, we go to the farmers market. We're all in this together, and having an option for choice. Remember, the reason why there's demand for BCS is because LASD parents want a choice. And so if you take all the aspects together, you realize that both of us want to work together. So I have noticed that, there's been a little bit of vitriol towards BCS, and BCS parents, I think, are trying to work together. They want to support the 10-year agreement. That was a negotiated deal. Unfortunately, it looks like it's not going to pass today, or it's going to be continued to talk, but I also think the 2-year agreement isn't necessarily in the best interest of either community.
Thank you. Fatty.
Hi, I was not going to originally speak, but I want to say I'm actually not so sure if the interim plan is going to work for BCS, if they're going to agree to it. But I think we do need it when the 10-year agreement is, we are having so much issue as a community digesting that. We do need some type of a interim solution, I think, that is going to give the community some time to digest the long term. I think we do need that, and that gives us a little bit of a feeling that okay, we are doing something, but while we are trying to work with each other, while we are working on the longer term solution. I'm kind of on the fence. I'm not absolutely sure if that plan is going to work with them, but that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one more card. In the future, really, right as the last person speaking, let's not put in a card. Oh. We do listen to everybody, but...
Thanks for not making me that guy. I appreciate it. Good evening, everybody. I wanted to take the opportunity to thank you guys, as everybody else has. I went to some of the community meetings. I met some of you. I've spoken to you. I think you're good people. One thing I didn't hear people talking about tonight is the county and the fact that the county charters the school and the county holds the leash. A small contingent of us went to the county at the monthly meeting about 2 weeks ago, and we made some statements to the county. It felt a little ineffectual, or at least they kind of got caught off guard, maybe on the back foot. No comments from them. The reason I came up here is I want to support you guys. I want to work with you in the future, and I encourage everybody in the room to do that. I also want feedback from you. What can we do to talk to the county to get them to get more oversight, aside from just going to the meetings, making public comments, and threatening to vote against them? So as we go forward, if you can help us figure out how to engage with the county as well, I would really appreciate that. And I have a lot of skin in this game. I've got little babies sleeping at home right now. So I'm in this for the long haul. I'm sure I'm not the only person here who is in a similar situation. So please consider us community members when you make your choice. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Maybe. Yun Kai Zhao. And that's it.
All right, I have a lot of thank you to say, but given that I only have 2 minutes and I'm already the last person, so I'm gonna cut that part out and just straight to the point. So I want to come here to share a little bit of my personal experience of coming to LSD. So I moved to Los Altos in year 2012, 7 years ago. When our family first moved to the Bay Area, we first looked at goodschools.org and said, oh, Cupertino and Palo Alto have the best scores. So we went there and tried to thinking of buying a house there and going to the school there. And we want to enter one day we just happened to walk by Collins Elementary School's backyard, and they were in recess. What we noticed is 90% are Asian kids. Probably 45% is Indians, 45% is Chinese. So my wife made a comment, if we just want to go to a school with all Asian kids, we could have stayed in China without coming to US. So that's how we came to Los Altos. And the reason we came to Los Altos is the diversity of this community. And we love the diversity. By diversity, it's not just by race, but more importantly, it's also about what background they come from, right? So I want to share the second part of my story. That we entered Collington, and my daughter now has the first daughter now is in Egan. So about 3 or 4 years ago, there was this school concert, and the 8th grade was performing, and it turned out to be that I noticed when my daughter entered the stage, she was holding a special needs student's hand the entire time, and turned out to be, I did not know this, she was helping this student the entire way. And that to me was what I learned is what public education is supposed to be. Mm-hmm. I never actually know that my daughter went through that. And she's being the best friend with that special needs student and helping her through the challenges. And she got the best education ever I could possibly potentially give her. So to me, selecting LSD school is a non-choice. That it's definitely got to be the choice. And for that, I would say we want to keep our public school and don't give our neighborhood school to a school who wants to run as a private, but at the same time wants to pull public funding. Thank you.
Young Kai. All right. Let's start discussion. I'll start with Steve.
So I do hear the voice of people saying they don't want us to randomly enter into a shorter agreement without it. I'll just say that 18 months ago when we first sat down with the charter school, they actually asked us, what are you giving us? What's the framework? What are you going to provide? And I said, well, it's your job to tell us what you need and come up with a reasonable request for need. We'll come back with what we can actually do. So in keeping with that original request for them, I think we're going to come back with what we can provide. And this will be the framework for that. Someone else made a comment about choice versus charter law. Charter schools, I'm old. Back in the day when we first put the idea of choice schools on the ballot in California, it was called choice schools. It lost. The idea of charter schools geared towards helping kids in areas that needed support and development won. And that's actually the law that passed all those years ago. So the concept of choice being choice for choice's sake really is an evolving comment that's come out of the California State Charter School Association's bending of the law to make it that. That's not what it was intended to do. So please understand that. So for those of you who are new to the states or new to this concept, understand that that's kind of where some of us are still coming from, is that charter law was really intended for another purpose than what's currently being interpreted to do here. That said, I think coming up with an agreement, something for them to at least react to, we need to do that. They've already enrolled 200 more children. We need to figure out a place to put them for the fall. I can't put them in the existing buildings we have. I think this option makes more sense from an investment long-term than going back to the Prop 39 agreement that we currently have out. So I'd rather see us go down this path together and hope that BCS will get on board with maintaining their enrollment cap during this period while we work with the community to come up with an alternative that makes some sense.
Vladimir?
I'd like to address the comment of being disingenuous. I don't think that's not our intent. At least it's not my intent for this, and I think that's probably shared by other board members. We want some sort of interim agreement, And there's one that's part of something else. And if you don't like them, that's okay. We can go back to Prop 39. But I actually think that Prop 39 is not as good for BCS as this interim agreement would be. I personally, I think as long as we delay and as long as we spend time thinking about what we want in the future, that's fine with me. So I'm agnostic between Prop 39 and this interim agreement here as proposed. But I think it's probably, I don't think BCS will agree to it, but I think it's probably in their short-term interest to agree to it.
Shelley?
So suspenseful. I agree with both of my colleagues who've spoken before me. And I also want to emphatically say there was no desire to bait and switch or be disingenuous. I mean, someone had said previously about stop the divisive rhetoric. Well, that feels very divisive to me. Our goal in the interim agreement is to give our community and all of us in the community time to go through a public engagement process. It was not intended to be a bait and switch. So that's pretty much all I have to say.
Brian.
Thank you again for the comments. I want to answer a few of the questions, and I think I mostly agree with my colleagues as well. I mean, if BCS won't sign an agreement, then we're in Prop 39 for 2019-2020. When we put out our preliminary Prop 39 offer back in February, which split BCS across 3 sites, I saw some comment from BCS board members saying that they were pretty sure that a way could be found to accommodate them on just 2 sites, which I think is the first few years of the proposed long-term agreement. So I agree, I think, with Vladimir that for next year, year 1 of the proposed agreement is better than our preliminary Prop 39 offer. I think it's where we would end up if the Prop 39 process continued. So I think year 1 is just BCS and us agreeing that that's the best for both sides and dispensing with a few extra weeks of paperwork and just getting on with planning and implementation. So past year 1, I think somebody asked sort of why is it, what milestone does 2 years get you? And I think the answer to that is it gives us time to do this community process. So if we only have a 1-year agreement, then the planning for the 2020 school year and that whole Prop 39 process starts in August of 2019 and September and October, right in the middle of when we're trying to use our staff time to manage this community engagement process to figure out what the long term is. So that's why I think it would be better for everybody to have a 2-year agreement, just so we know what's going to happen for the next 2 years. We can stop spending time and resources and energy on that, and we can invest it in figuring out the long term. As my colleagues have commented, part of the reason that there were opt-outs is because we knew this was happening fast. We knew there were going to be concerns raised. We haven't actually purchased the 10th site yet. There's a whole lot of work that needs to happen. So it was always clear that the Egan relocation might not happen. So that's why the proposed long-term agreement explicitly contemplates that the Egan relocation might not happen. Now, there have been given the number of concerns around traffic and safety that the board has a duty to take very seriously, I actually think it's better for BCS that we take 6 months and figure out if any of those concerns make the Egan relocation infeasible, because then they're only stuck with the interim for a year or 2. And stuck being their terminology. They've only committed to the interim for a year or 2 rather than 4 to 6 years, the way they would be if we signed the proposed long-term agreement today, which we haven't done, or even if we signed it next week and then discovered at the end of the 6-month process that the relocation were infeasible. So, before we got into this whole negotiation, given where the 10th site was in the process and everything else, it always seemed to me like a short bridge agreement to extend the 5-year a little bit, give us time to work all this stuff out was the right way to go. And I think we've kind of circled around back to that, where it just makes the most sense. So as I said, I think the first year is kind of a no-brainer. The second year, as far as I know, the BCS board hasn't made plans to sort of take it up from their side. So I'm honestly not sure whether it makes sense for us to vote on a 2-year as presented tonight, given that the fact they haven't taken it up suggests to me that they aren't wild about it, as has been suggested. So I'm honestly not sure what to do about that as far as it goes. I mean, it seems like we could maybe think about doing a 1-year, since that seems like a little bit more of a no-brainer to me. I don't think BCS would be giving anything up in a 1 year. They've already enrolled there's, sort of agreeing to a cap for year 1 is sort of meaningless because they've already enrolled their kids for 2019. But I also don't know if we need a formal vote to do that, or if we could just get a sense of the board to sort of reopen discussions with their group or what. So I'm open to thoughts about that.
I agree with pretty much everything I've heard so far. As it relates to the comments about bait and switch and disingenuous, as Brian said, as commenters have said, there is that out in the agreement. But if we were to kind of just hold on to that right now and say we have that out, and use it, it would be in bad faith. We would be using it for the interim agreement, and that would be doing it in bad faith. I think it's better to say, actually, this is what we want. We want an interim agreement so we can go through this process. I think using that out and having possibly go the 10-year route, I think would have been in bad faith. I really want this process to move on and move as quickly as possible. I hear people wanting us really to figure this out and figure it out with the new people in the room. So I'm not against actually making this more of a 1 year than a 2-year agreement. And I do think that we could agree to it tonight. If somehow counterparts from BCS are even considering it, we're not signing it tonight, or the agreement's not done tonight, because there's only one party that would have agreed to it. That's my, contract law 101 for you. So any other thoughts from other board members?
I'd be concerned going 1 year, given where we did the lottery ended up this year. We'd be in the process of still doing community input, and a lottery could be opened up on us.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd much rather see us go for 2 and at least propose that up front.
Mm-hmm.
And if you guys are open to another edit to it, I probably wouldn't agree, but it doesn't mean that you couldn't move forward with it. I'd rather see at least a couple of years in here to go through this process in a meaningful way versus being constrained by potential deadlines that get cropped up onto the calendar that we don't control.
All right. Shelley, Donmir, anything?
Amazingly, I agree with Steve.
All right, so do I have a motion? Somebody motion something.
I'd like to move that we approve the interim agreement for 2 years as presented.
Do I get a second?
I'll second that.
All in favor? Oh, yeah. Oh, sorry. Discussion. We don't normally discuss again.
I know, but it's in the process.
It is in the process.
So I actually think so I'm likely to support this motion because I think that 2 years, for the reasons that have been discussed, is in the best interest of both sides, actually. I would say that I'm open, and I hope the board will support Jessica and I if we get feedback from the other side in discussions with them and possibly bringing back an amended agreement in the future. I just want to make sure that from my perspective, this is not a take it or leave it vote for BCS. We would love to collaborate and get feedback and come up with something that's better than the default Prop 39 process. I don't know whether that'll happen, but that's my hope.
And tagging on to what he's saying, we're bringing it back to you. It's not, either way, if we've spoken with them, it's been brought back to you for public comment before we vote on it again anyway. So we have a motion, and we have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Passes 5-0. All right. All right, we are moving on to E3, funding and joint use agreement with the City of Mountain View. If you decide to leave, we do ask that you are quiet about it so we can finish the meeting. Thank you. That means don't talk while you leave. All right.
Shall I go ahead?
Yes, please.
You can hear me, right?
I can hear you. Speak a little louder, though.
Yeah.
We're trying to continue the meeting, so please do not talk until you've left the room. Please.
Losing battle there. So what you have before you tonight is an action item. It is the funding and joint use agreement with the City of Mountain View over the proposed 10th site, assuming that we ultimately acquire that site. This is a commitment by the City of Mountain View to fund $23 million to help us acquiring the site. In exchange, we agree to put in certain facilities for joint use for us during the school day, for the city to use and to manage as public facilities after school and during summertime when it's not used as a school site. And I'm just going to turn it back to you for discussion and for a vote for approval.
All right.
Sorry, I do want to make one, Jessica, I want to make one more comment.
Yes.
In the agreement that you have as part of the backup, there is a reference to Exhibit A, and Exhibit A in the backup right now is a placeholder. It's a map of the site until all the different layouts of the site are determined in conversation with the city, in terms of where the city park might go, in terms of where we lay out the campus. That will determine what Exhibit A will ultimately look like, and we can amend the agreement with that exhibit in place. We've checked with legal counsel on that.
Great, thank you. Shally, any comments?
No comments.
Steve?
Yeah, it still contains the one factor that I don't care for, which is them stepping in and telling us who we can educate where. So that's the reason why I would have a hard time supporting this.
All right. Brian?
No detailed comments. Thank you to Randy and all the rest of the staff on the hard work that's gone into this. As I think I've said in other contexts, I think that we had a former board member who commented about how school sites got sold off over the years, and it was a mistake. I think, as hard as it is to undo mistakes from past years, I think this is a small step kind of back from that will be a great asset to the community going forward. So I'm glad to see we're getting there, and I look forward to seeing the PSA soon.
Vladimir?
So first of all, I wanted to, Brandy and our consultants and Jeff have really spent hours and hours on this. So thank you for the work.
Weeks and weeks, really.
What's that?
Weeks and weeks, really.
Yes. It's been a lot. There are so many moving parts in this particular deal that to have it come together is just totally amazing. And I'd like to everybody to understand that I think this is the deal of the century, because we're essentially getting a $150 million, roughly speaking, site, the Kohl site, for $30, $40, $50 million. It's our last chance, basically, to expand the district, to expand the pie that I was talking about. I do have some concerns, some technical concerns about it, but because I'm so much in favor of the basic concept, that I'm ready to support it.
Great. I have no extra comments. Again, thank you for all the hard work that's gone on with this, Randy and team, and all of our attorneys. I'm amazed that we've got to this point now, and so I'm ready for a motion. Do I get a motion to approve the funding and joint use agreement between LASD and the City of Mountain View?
I so move.
Do I get a second?
Can I ask a question? Can I
Yes.
just want to make sure it's clear, subject to the negotiation of and definition of Exhibit A down the road, whatever legal language is needed at this hour. Does that need to be an amendment to the motion, or is the motion sufficient?
I think it's good to have that as an amendment.
Okay, I would like to offer a friendly amendment
Yes.
to the motion that the approval be subject to our staff and council continuing to work out the definition of exactly the placement of the park and joint use facilities on the project site with the City of Mountain View for and generation of the updated Exhibit A.
So I'm assuming my next move is, do I get a second to that
No.
motion with the amendment?
No, Shelley has to either accept or reject.
Okay. Do you accept that? Yeah.
Yes, I accept the amendment to my original motion.
Now do I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Any abstaining? All right. So it passes 4-1. Meeting adjourned. No, it's not a normal meeting.